Her own mother abandoned her on the canyon ledge to die, all for the sin of being born with a split lip. The Apache warrior who found the screaming infant saw not a cursed child, but a divine gift, one whose divided face would one day unite two divided worlds. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Eagles Crossing, Colorado Territory, spring of 1858. The sun had not yet crested the jagged horizon when Martha Holloway wrapped her infant daughter in a thin cotton blanket. Her hands trembled, pale fingers working quickly before her resolve could weaken. 3 months had passed since she'd brought Maria into the world. 3 months of whispers, of neighbors crossing to the other side of the settlement's muddy main street to avoid her shadow, of the pastor's pitying glances that held more judgment than compassion. "It's God's mark," they'd whispered when the midwife stepped back from the birthing bed, her face ashen at the sight of the infant's split upper lip. "The devil's touch," others murmured when Martha ventured to the general store, the baby's face half hidden against her shoulder. Thomas Holloway, Martha's husband of 2 years, had taken to spending his evenings at the saloon rather than in their small cabin at the edge of Eagles Crossing. He couldn't bear to look at the child, he'd said, couldn't stomach the sight of that gap where flesh should meet flesh, that permanent grimace that made the baby look like she was mocking him. "There are places," the midwife had whispered to Martha last Sunday after service, eyes darting to ensure no one could overhear, "places where they take unfortunates like her, asylums back east." But Martha knew what happened in such places. The children who entered rarely emerged. The settlement had grown increasingly hostile. Last week, Eliza Johnston had yanked her 2 young sons away when Martha approached the well, as if the infant's condition were some plague that might leap from child to child. 2 days ago, someone had nailed a crude wooden cross to their door in the night. Last night, Thomas had come home drunk, his eyes wild with a desperation that frightened her more than his anger ever had. "The crops are dying," he'd slurred, gripping her arms so tightly they bruised. "Carpenter's cow birthed a 2-headed calf yesterday. Jenkins lost his entire wheat field to blight." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They're saying it's because of her, that she's cursed this land." Martha had always thought herself stronger than superstition, but as the whispers grew and her husband's face hardened with each passing day, doubt had crept in like the mountain frost, silent and deadly. The canyon lay 3 miles east of the settlement. The Ute called it Shadow's End, a place where the walls rose so high that shadow and light battled from dawn till dusk. The settlers avoided it, claiming the echoes that bounced between its ancient walls were the voices of lost souls. "It's mercy," Thomas had insisted, his voice breaking. "The Lord will take her to his bosom, better than what awaits her here." Martha's tears fell onto the blanket as she secured it with trembling fingers. The infant slept, unaware of what was to come. The split in her upper lip seemed less pronounced in sleep, and for a moment, Martha saw only her child, not the deformity that had become her identity in the eyes of others, but the memory of the cross on their door, of Thomas's haunted eyes, steeled her resolve. The trail to the canyon was steep and treacherous in the pre-dawn gloom. Twice Martha nearly turned back, but the weight of the settlement's judgment drove her forward. At the canyon's edge, the first golden rays of sunlight spilled over the eastern rim, illuminating the vast emptiness below. Martha knelt, placing the bundle on a wide, flat stone near the edge. The baby stirred, dark eyes opening to gaze up at her mother. "May God have mercy," Martha whispered, making the sign of the cross. Then she turned and fled, her sobs echoing off the ancient walls as the sun rose fully over Shadow's End Canyon, where little Maria lay abandoned, her cries joining the wind's mournful song through the stone corridors below. Naiche moved silently along the rim of Shadow's End Canyon. his moccasins barely disturbing the loose stones beneath his feet. 3 days of solitude in the high desert had left his face weathered and his spirit renewed. The vision quest that began under the full moon had brought him clarity, painful clarity that had torn open wounds he'd thought healed. The Apache warrior wore only a breechcloth and a single eagle feather tied at the nape of his neck. His chest, bare and scarred from past battles, rose and fell with measured breath as he paused to gaze at the vast expanse. This canyon had been sacred to his people for generations. The Wind People, his mother had called them, spirits who whispered secrets of past and future to those patient enough to listen. Naiche had needed those whispers. 6 moons had passed since Apache, his wife of 5 winters, had given birth to their son. The labor had been difficult, the infant small and struggling. Neither had survived the night. Naiche had buried them beneath the ancient cottonwood where they'd first pledged themselves to one another, and in the months since, a hollowness had taken root in his chest, spreading like shadow until he could no longer remember how it felt to be whole. The elders had sent him to seek vision, to find purpose beyond grief. For 3 days, he had neither eaten nor slept, allowing the elements to scour him clean as the canyon winds scoured the stone. And now, as dawn painted the sky in hues of amber and gold, he was returning to his people, still grieving, but no longer lost. A sound caught his ear, faint but distinctive. A cry, high and wavering, carried on the morning breeze. Naiche froze, head cocked to one side. No coyote pup made such a noise. No bird of the canyon sang with such desperation. He knew that sound, the cry of a human infant. Moving with practiced caution, Naiche followed the sound along the canyon rim. The crying grew louder, then stopped abruptly, only to begin again with renewed vigor. It led him to a flat outcropping of stone that jutted over the canyon's depths. There, wrapped in a pale cotton blanket, lay a tiny bundle. Naiche approached slowly, disbelieving. Who would leave a child in such a place? The infant sensed his presence and quieted momentarily, dark eyes blinking up at the looming figure that now blocked the sun. The warrior knelt beside the bundle, his calloused fingers gentle as he pulled back the blanket's edge. A female child, no more than a few moons old, gazed up at him. Her skin was pale, her wispy hair the color of dried corn husks, a white settler's child. But it was her face that made Naiche draw in a sharp breath. The child's upper lip was divided, revealing pink gums and the bud of a tooth. Understanding dawned like the sun, now cresting the canyon walls. Among some tribes, such children were considered touched by spirits, blessed with connection to the unseen world. But he had heard that white settlers feared such differences, saw them as marks of evil or divine punishment. "They left you to die, little one," he murmured in his native tongue, "because they could not see your worth." The baby's tiny fist escaped the blanket, reaching upward as if in answer. Her cries had softened to whimpers, her eyes never leaving his face. Naiche felt something stir in the hollow space within his chest, not filling the void left by his son, but creating something new alongside it, a purpose, clear as the vision he'd sought in the desert. With gentle hands, he lifted the infant, securing her against his chest. She was lighter than she should be, her body warm but weak. How long had she been alone on this stone? Hours, since nightfall. "The white man's fear has given you to the people," he told her softly, "and the people do not waste such gifts." He wrapped her more securely in the blanket, sheltering her face from the strengthening sun. His wife's sister, Kiona, had a young son. She would have milk. The medicine woman would know how to strengthen this fragile creature, how to heal the division in her lip, if such healing was meant to be. As Naiche turned from the canyon edge, the baby nestled against him. A hawk circled overhead, its cry piercing the morning stillness. A sign, perhaps, that his path was true. With the rising sun at his back, The warrior began the journey home, carrying with him a child of two worlds, abandoned by one but claimed by another. The sun had climbed high in the sky by the time Nietzsche approached the cluster of wickiups nestled in the sheltered valley his people called Whispering Pines. The settlement of 30 dwellings stood arranged in a half-circle, smoke rising from cooking fires as women ground maize and mended garments, children darting between the structures in play. The infant had fallen asleep against Nietzsche's chest, her breathing shallow but steady. Twice during the journey, he had paused to wet her lips with water from his deerskin pouch, coaxing tiny sips into her mouth. Each time, she had looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold trust beyond her understanding. A young boy spotted him first, raising the cry that Nietzsche had returned. The news spread quickly, faces appearing in doorways, activities halted as the tribe gathered to welcome the warrior back from his vision quest. They did not expect him to return with a white infant in his arms. Makia, the eldest of the tribal council and Nietzsche's uncle, stepped forward first. His face, lined with the wisdom of 70 winters, remained impassive as he took in the sight before him. "You left to seek vision," the old man said, his voice like dry leaves rustling, "and return with a child not of our blood." Nietzsche met his uncle's gaze steadily. "The spirits guided my path to her. She was left to die at Shadow's End." A murmur rippled through the gathered tribe. Shadow's End was known to all as a place of power, where the veil between worlds grew thin. To find a child, there was an omen, though whether good or ill remained to be seen. "Her face," whispered a woman near the front. "It bears the spirit's mark." The infant chose that moment to wake, her tiny face scrunching as she began to fuss. The split in her upper lip seemed more pronounced in the daylight, the gap revealing gums and the roof of her mouth when she cried. "She is cursed," muttered Tokala, a warrior who had lost 2 sons to a settler's bullet the previous spring. His voice carried an edge sharp as flint. "The white man's blood runs in her veins. They left her for dead because even they recognize the evil she brings." "She brings no evil," came a woman's voice, clear and firm. The crowd parted as Kiona stepped forward, her own infant son bound to a cradle board on her back. Nietzsche's sister-in-law approached without hesitation, her dark eyes softening as they fell upon the child in his arms. "She is hungry," Kiona said simply, reaching for the bundle. "And cold, despite the sun's warmth." Nietzsche transferred the infant carefully, watching as Kiona unwrapped the thin cotton blanket, examining the child with practiced hands. "My sister's husband brings us no curse," she announced to the gathered tribe. "He brings us a child who has survived abandonment, exposure, and hunger." Her gaze swept the circle, challenging anyone to contradict her. "Such strength deserves respect, not fear." Ahote, the medicine man, pushed his way through the crowd, his gnarled fingers clutching a staff adorned with eagle feathers and strips of colored cloth. He leaned close to peer at the infant's face, his breath smelling of herbs and smoke. After a long moment, he straightened, turning to address the tribe. "The division in her face is no curse," he declared. "It is a sign she exists between worlds, just as our people now must learn to exist between worlds. The old ways and the new press against us, like the 2 sides of a canyon." He pointed his staff at the child. "This one may help us find the path through." Not everyone was convinced. Tokala spat on the ground and turned away. Others exchanged uneasy glances, years of conflict with white settlers having taught them caution. But Makia nodded slowly, the authority in his weathered face silencing further dissent. "The child will stay," he pronounced. "Nietzsche found her. Nietzsche will be responsible for her fate among us." As the crowd dispersed, Kiona moved toward her wickiup with the infant, Nietzsche following close behind. Inside the shelter, she settled on a pile of hides, deftly unwrapping her son from the cradleboard before offering her breast to the hungry white child. "What will you call her?" Kiona asked as the baby latched with surprising strength. Naicha watched the infant, this small being who had already endured more than many grown warriors. The emptiness inside him shifted, not filling but changing shape. "Ayita," he said quietly, "first to dance." 5 summers passed like wind through the valley. Ayita grew from a fragile infant into a spirited child with sun-lightened hair that fell in tangled waves past her shoulders. Her eyes, dark as obsidian, had taken on the watchful quality of the people, observing everything, missing nothing. The split in her upper lip remained, though Ahote had worked his medicine to ensure it did not prevent her from eating or speaking. Naiche built a wickiup for them at the edge of the settlement, where the pines grew thicker and offered shade from the harsh summer sun. Each morning, he would wake before dawn to find Ayita already outside, practicing with the small bow he had fashioned for her, or grinding corn alongside Kiona, whose son Ilan had become Ayita's constant companion. "She learns quickly," Kiona remarked one evening as they watched the children chasing fireflies in the summer twilight. "Faster than most." Naiche nodded, pride warming his chest. "She has much to prove." For despite Ahote's proclamation and Makya's acceptance, not everyone in the tribe had embraced the white child. Tokala still turned away when she approached, and his sons followed his example, excluding Ayita from their games. Several of the older women watched her with wary eyes, especially when game became scarce or illness visited the tribe. Ayita felt their rejection, but rarely spoke of it. Instead, she worked harder, rising earlier, practicing longer, listening more intently to the stories and teachings. She learned to speak the language with almost native fluency, her words carrying only the slightest hint of difference because of her divided lip. "Why do the others look at me differently, Father?" she had asked once when she was 4 summers old. Naiche had been preparing a deerskin, scraping it clean with practiced strokes. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You were born to the white people," he explained. "Some of our tribe have suffered greatly at their hands. But I am not white," she had protested. "I am of the people." Naiche had put down his tools then, turning to face his daughter. "You are of the people because the people have claimed you," he said firmly. "But you must understand that the past casts long shadows. In time, you will prove yourself to even the most doubtful." Now, as the tribe prepared for the summer solstice ceremony, that opportunity had arrived. "The children will perform the butterfly dance," Kiona informed him as they collected pinyon nuts beneath the spreading trees. "Ilan has been practicing for weeks." The butterfly dance was a sacred tradition, typically performed by children who had reached their 5th summer. It celebrated renewal and transformation, honoring those who had grown from helpless infants into contributing members of the tribe. "Ayita wishes to join," Kiona continued, watching his face carefully. "She has been learning the steps from Ilan." Naiche felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. The dance was sacred. Some would see a white child's participation as sacrilege, yet denying her would only confirm what some whispered, that she would never truly belong. That night, he found Ayita sitting outside their wickiup, staring up at the stars that blanketed the sky like scattered embers. "Kiona tells me you wish to join the butterfly dance," he said, settling beside her. Ayita nodded, her small face serious in the moonlight. "I know the steps," she said. "I practice when no one watches." "It is not just about knowing the steps," Naiche explained gently. "The dance honors our ancestors and the spirits who guide us." "Are they not my ancestors too?" she asked, the question so innocent yet so profound that Naiche found himself momentarily speechless. "You are my father. The people are my people." Her hand unconsciously touched the split in her lip. "Even if I look different." Naiche reached out, resting his hand on her small shoulder. "I will speak with Makya and Ahote," he promised. The council meeting lasted into the night, voices rising and falling like the wind through the pines. Tokala argued vehemently against allowing the white child to participate in sacred traditions. Others echoed his concerns more moderately, but Ahote, whose medicine had strengthened the frail infant and whose wisdom was respected by all, spoke last. "The child was sent to us at Shadow's End," he reminded them. "She bears the mark that speaks of walking between worlds. In these changing times, should we not welcome one who might help us navigate both?" In the end, Makya nodded his weathered head. "Ayita will dance," he decreed. "Let her steps prove whether the spirits accept her as one of the people." The day of the solstice dawned bright and clear. The children who would dance had been purified with sage smoke at dawn, their faces painted with symbols of transformation. Ayita stood among them, her split lip accentuated rather than hidden by the red ochre that outlined her mouth. As the drums began and the voices of the tribe rose in ancient song, the children moved into the circle. Elan led with confident steps, his movements mirroring the butterfly's journey from earthbound crawler to skybound spirit. Ayita followed, her small body moving with a grace that belied her years. Each step, each turn of her wrists, each dip and rise, all executed with perfect precision, her eyes half closed as if listening to music beyond the drums. The tribe watched in silence as this child of two worlds danced with the heart of one who belonged. Winter descended upon Whispering Pines with unusual ferocity that year. By Ayita's 10th winter, she had grown tall and willowy, her corn silk hair often bound in two braids, adorned with beads and feathers given to her by Ahote, who had taken special interest in the child's education. The split in her lip had become less pronounced as she grew, though it still marked her as different, both from the people and from any white settlers they occasionally encountered during hunting expeditions. The morning began like any other in the cold season. Ayita rose before dawn to help Naiche prepare for a hunting journey. Game had grown scarce as snow blanketed the valley, and the tribe's stores were dwindling faster than expected. "I can track better than Tokala's eldest," Ayita insisted, securing her rabbit fur cloak around her shoulders. "Let me come with the hunting party." Naiche regarded his daughter thoughtfully. She had indeed become one of the tribe's most skilled trackers, her eyes able to discern signs others missed. But a hunting expedition during such bitter cold was dangerous, and Tokala, who would lead this hunt, still harbored resentment toward the white-born child. "Your place is here," Naiche said finally, adjusting the quiver of arrows on his back. "The women and children need protection while the hunters are gone." Disappointment flashed across Ayita's face before she mastered it, nodding with the respect she had been taught to show her father. "I will watch over Kiona and Elan," she promised. As the hunting party departed, 12 of the tribe's strongest men tracking west toward the highlands, where deer might still be found, an uneasy quiet settled over the remaining camp. 23 women, 18 children, and 7 elders too frail for the journey remained behind. The first day passed uneventfully. The second brought heavier snow, flakes falling so thick that the pines surrounding the settlement disappeared into white mist. By the third day, worry began to creep through the camp like frost. "They should have returned by now," Kiona murmured as she and Ayita collected firewood at the settlement's edge. Her son, Elan, now 15 and considered nearly a man, had been permitted to join the hunting party for the first time, a fact that had stung Ayita, despite her genuine happiness for her closest friend. "The snow slows them," Ayita reassured her. Though her own chest felt tight with concern for Naiche and Elan, they are skilled hunters. They will return. It was midday when the cry went up from the northern edge of the settlement. Not the triumphant call of returning hunters, but a shout of alarm that sent Ayita running, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 riders approached through the falling snow, their horses laboring through drifts that reached the animals' chests. Not Apache warriors, but white men, trappers, by the look of their heavy fur garments and the long rifles strapped to their backs. Makia, despite his advanced age, stepped forward to meet them, his thin frame dwarfed by the mounted men. "We seek shelter," the lead trapper called out, his breath clouding in the frigid air. "Just until the storm passes, we've supplies to trade." Ayita hung back, instinctively pulling her cloak's hood lower to shadow her face. In her 10 years among the people, she had encountered white settlers only a handful of times, always from a distance, always with Nietzsche's protective presence beside her. Makia hesitated visibly. The people's relationship with white trappers and settlers was uneasy at best, openly hostile at worst. Yet the tribe lived by a code of hospitality that transcended such tensions, especially in the face of deadly winter storms. "You may remain until the snow ceases," the old man pronounced, his English stilted but clear, "but you will leave your weapons here." He gestured to a central wickiup where the tribe stored communal supplies. The trappers exchanged glances, clearly reluctant to disarm. "You have our word as Apache that no harm will come to you while you shelter with us," Makia continued, "but we require the same assurance from you." After a moment of tense silence, the lead trapper nodded. "Fair enough, old man." As the trappers dismounted and were led to a vacant wickiup at the settlement's edge, Ayita slipped away, returning to Nietzsche's dwelling where she busied herself with mending a torn moccasin. She had no desire to face the white men's curious stares, or worse, their disgust if they noticed her divided lip. But isolation proved impossible in the close-knit settlement. By evening, as the tribe gathered around the central fire to share the meager meal of pine nut soup and dried berries, the trappers joined them, their bearded faces ruddy in the firelight. "Girl!" called the youngest trapper, a man with eyes the color of summer sky. "Fetch us some of that soup, would you?" Aita, who had been sitting beside Kiona with her face half turned away, stiffened at being addressed directly. Slowly, she raised her head, meeting the trapper's gaze with the steady confidence Nietzsche had taught her. The man's eyes widened as he took in her features, the golden hair, the dark eyes, and the split lip that marked her as different from both the people and his own kind. "Well, I'll be damned," he breathed, nudging his companions. "Look at this. They've got themselves a little white captive." Ayita felt, rather than saw, the tribe's collective tension, like a bowstring drawn taut. "I am not a captive," she replied in perfect English, her voice carrying clearly across the fire. "I am Ayita of the Nd people, daughter of Nietzsche, the mountain hawk." The trappers stared in stunned silence, and for a moment Ayita glimpsed herself through their eyes, a white-skinned girl in Apache clothing, speaking both languages with equal fluency, her divided lip making her an outcast among either people. "How long have they kept you?" the older trapper asked, his voice rough with what sounded like concern. "Were there others?" Before Ayita could respond, Makia rose to his feet, his aged frame somehow imposing despite its frailty. "Ayita is of the people," he stated firmly. "She is no captive, but a daughter of our tribe." The tension around the fire stretched like a living thing, and Ayita suddenly understood that her presence, the very fact of her existence between worlds, had created a moment of danger for the entire tribe. The fire crackled in the heavy silence, sparks spiraling upward to join the falling snow. Ayita felt every eye upon her, the suspicious glares of the trappers, the protective gazes of the tribe who had raised her, Kiona's hand gripping her arm in silent support. "Girl," the lead trapper said, leaning forward, "what's your real name? Who were your people before these savages took you?" The word savages fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples of anger through the gathered tribe. Several of the younger women murmured in their native tongue, their voices low and dangerous. Ayita straightened her spine, the way Nietzsche had taught her to face challenges. "I have told you my name," she replied evenly. "I have told you my people." The youngest trapper shook his head, his expression a mixture of pity and disbelief. "Look at yourself. Your skin, your hair, you're white as we are. They've just filled your head with their heathen ways." "James," the older trapper cautioned, noticing the darkening expressions around the fire. "We're guests here." But James wasn't finished. "You've got family out there somewhere," he insisted, addressing Ayita directly. "Real family that's been missing you all these years. Probably think you're dead." The words struck deeper than Ayita wanted to admit. In the quiet hours of night, she had sometimes wondered about the woman who had given birth to her, about why she had been left at the canyon's edge. Nietzsche had never hidden the truth of her discovery, though he rarely spoke of it. "My father found me abandoned," she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within. "Left to die at Shadow's End Canyon, the people gave me life when my birth people chose my death." The eldest trapper's weather-lined face softened slightly. "Shadow's End, that'd be what we call Devil's Drop," he muttered. 10 years back, you say?" Ayita nodded. "There was a settlement nearby then, Eagle's Crossing. Most folks moved on after a bad drought season, but I recall—" He stopped, eyes narrowing as they fixed on Ayita's split lip. There was talk of a baby born with a curse mark, hair lip, they called it. A murmur passed through the tribe as Ahote translated his words. Ayita felt her chest tighten, the soup in her belly turning cold. "You know who left me there?" The question escaped before she could contain it. The trapper shrugged. "Just rumors. Holloway was the name, I think. God-fearing folks. Must have been desperate to do such a thing." Holloway, the name meant nothing to Ayita, yet it echoed in her mind like a strange, distant call. For the first time in her memory, she felt the weight of her double existence, born to one world, raised by another, belonging fully to neither. "It matters not who left her," Makya interjected firmly, his voice creaking with age but unwavering in authority. "What matters is who found her, who raised her, who loves her." The moment was interrupted by a shout from the settlement's edge. Through the curtain of falling snow, dark figures emerged, the hunting party returning, laden with fresh-killed deer. Nietzsche led them, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. Ayita's heart leapt. Never had she been so grateful to see her father. The atmosphere around the fire transformed instantly as the women rose to greet the returning hunters, relief evident in their voices. The arrival of fresh meat after days of sparse rations overshadowed the tension of moments before. Nietzsche strode directly to where Ayita stood, his sharp eyes taking in the scene, the white trappers, his daughter's tense posture, the protective circle of tribe members around her. "Father," Ayita said, slipping easily into Apache, "these men sought shelter from the storm. Makya granted it." Nietzsche nodded once, his gaze never leaving the trappers. "You are welcome to our fire," he said in careful English, "but not to trouble my daughter." James opened his mouth as if to argue, but the eldest trapper silenced him with a gesture. "We're grateful for the shelter," the old trapper replied, "and we mean no disrespect. It's just unusual to find a white child raised among your people." "She is not a white child," Nietzsche corrected, his voice as unyielding as the mountains that surrounded them. "She is Ayita of the people, my daughter." The way he said it, with such absolute certainty, filled Ayita with warmth that defied the winter chill. In that moment, the name Holloway seemed to lose its power, becoming merely a shadow from a past that had rejected her. As the tribe busied themselves with preparing the fresh meat, Ayita helped Ilan unload his portion of the hunt. The young man's face was alight with pride at his first successful hunting expedition. "What happened while we were gone?" he asked quietly, noticing her subdued manner. Ayita glanced toward the trappers, who now sat somewhat apart from the main group. "I learned something of where I came from," she replied, "and I remembered what matters more, where I belong." Spring came early that year, the snow retreating up the mountainsides like a tide drawing back to reveal the earth renewed. Ayita, now in her 16th summer, had grown into a young woman whose presence in the tribe was no longer questioned by most. The butterfly dance of her childhood had been followed by years of proving herself. In hunting, in healing alongside Apache, in the quiet dignity with which she faced the occasional whispers about her divided lip and pale skin. The trappers had departed once the worst of winter broke, but not before the eldest, William Blackwood, he'd called himself, had pressed a small leather-bound journal into Ayita's hands. "Found this in Eagle's Crossing before the settlement emptied," he'd told her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Might be nothing to do with you. Might be everything." For 3 months, the journal had remained wrapped in deerskin at the bottom of her sleeping furs. Ayita had not mentioned its existence to Naicha or anyone else. Some nights she would lie awake, feeling its presence like a smoldering ember beneath her, threatening to ignite questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. "You're distracted today," Ilan observed as they collected medicinal herbs along the stream bank. At 19, he had grown tall and broad-shouldered, his dark eyes holding a quiet confidence that drew others to him. The childhood friendship between them had deepened into something neither had yet named aloud, though the entire tribe saw it clearly. Ayita sighed, twisting a sprig of yarrow between her fingers. "I'm thinking about the past." "Whose past?" he asked, his perceptiveness one of the qualities she most valued in him. "Mine. Before the people." She hesitated, then admitted, "The trappers stirred old questions." Ilan's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in his eyes. "Questions you wish to answer." "Questions I fear to answer," she corrected. After a moment, she reached for his hand. "Ilan, would you think differently of me if I wanted to know more about where I came from? Who left me at the canyon?" His fingers tightened around hers. "How could I? Your past is part of what shaped you into who you are." He paused, then added carefully, "But Ayita, seeking answers doesn't mean you must leave what you found here." It was as if he'd seen straight to the heart of her unspoken fear. That curiosity about her origins might somehow betray the family who had raised her, especially Naicha, who had given her not just life but identity. That night, while the camp slept, Ayita finally unwrapped the journal. Its leather cover was cracked and weathered, the pages within filled with a feminine hand, the writing slanting sharply to the right as if hurrying forward. Martha Holloway read the inscription on the first page, followed by a date 17 years past. Ayita's heart quickened as she carefully turned the brittle pages, reading by the dim light of a single ember carefully maintained. The entries began mundanely, accounts of daily life in Eagle's Crossing, mentions of drought and difficult winters, hopes for better harvests. Then, about a third of the way through, the tone changed. "I am with child. Thomas is pleased, though he tries not to show it too plainly. We have waited so long for this blessing." Ayita's fingers trembled as she turned page after page, reading about the woman's hopes for her unborn child, her preparations, her prayers for a son who would help on their small farm. Then came the birth. She came into this world after a day and night of labor. Not the son Thomas prayed for, but a daughter with my mother's golden hair. We will call her Maria, after Thomas's mother. But there is something amiss. The midwife says it is a hair lip, a split in her upper mouth that makes her face look strange and twisted. Thomas will not look at her directly. God help me. Sometimes I cannot either. The entries grew darker, more desperate. Thomas drinking heavily, neighbors avoiding them, accusations of witchcraft and curses, the whole settlement suffering crop failures and livestock deaths that somehow became connected to the cursed child in their minds. The final entry made Ayita's blood run cold. Thomas says there is no choice. The child must be removed if we are to have any peace. He speaks of asylums back east, but his eyes tell a different story. May God forgive what we contemplate. May God forgive what we may do. I cannot see any path forward where my daughter lives among us. The journal ended there, the remaining pages blank, as empty as the canyon where Nietzsche had found a discarded infant 10 years earlier. Ayita closed the book, her chest so tight she could barely breathe. She had a name, Maria Holloway. She had a mother, Martha, and she had confirmation of what she had always known. She had been left to die because of the split in her lip, abandoned by those who should have protected her most. Dawn found her still awake. The journal returned to its hiding place, but its words burned into her memory. She moved through morning tasks mechanically, hardly hearing Kiona's cheerful conversation as they prepared the day's first meal. It was midday when a rider appeared at the settlement's edge, a white man on a dappled grey horse. Unusual but not unprecedented. Occasionally traders or trappers passed through, particularly in the warmer months. The tribe's reaction was practiced caution. Children gathered close, men casually positioning themselves near weapons, while Makia went forward to greet the stranger. Ayita remained by the cooking fire, instinctively keeping her face turned slightly away. But something about this visitor drew her attention. Perhaps the fine cut of his clothing, unusual for the frontier, or the way he sat his horse with the ease of one born to privilege. "I seek information," the man was saying to Makia, his voice carrying across the settlement, "about a settlement that once stood near here, Eagle's Crossing." Ayita's head snapped up, her hands freezing in the midst of grinding corn. Eagle's Crossing, the very name that had filled her thoughts since the previous night. "Why do you ask of this place?" Makia questioned, his weathered face revealing nothing. The stranger removed his hat, revealing hair the color of wheat fields in autumn. "My name is Samuel Holloway. I'm searching for any trace of my brother's family. They settled here years ago but never returned east as planned." Holloway. The name hit Ayita like a physical blow. Her corn-grinding stone clattered to the ground, drawing the stranger's attention directly to her golden hair so like his own, to her split lip, to her eyes wide with shock. Samuel Holloway's gaze lingered on Ayita, his eyes narrowing as they took in her features. A tense silence fell over the settlement, broken only by the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. "That girl," Samuel said finally, pointing toward Ayita. "She's white." Nietzsche, who had been skinning a deer at the edge of the clearing, rose slowly, knife still in hand. He moved to stand near Ayita, his presence solid and reassuring at her side. "She is Ayita," he said simply. "She is of the people." Samuel dismounted, his movements careful as he noted the warriors watching him with hands resting casually near weapons. "May I speak with her?" Makia looked to Ayita, leaving the decision in her hands. She felt frozen between worlds, the journal's words echoing in her mind alongside the steady beat of her heart that had been nurtured in this place, among these people. "I will speak with him," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. Nietzsche's jaw tightened, but he nodded once, respecting her choice while making it clear he would remain close. Ayita led Samuel to a flat stone at the edge of the settlement, close enough for the tribe to see them, far enough for private conversation. As they sat, she kept her face turned slightly away, an old habit when confronted with strangers. "Your name?" Samuel began, studying her intently. "What did they call you before?" "I have always been Ayita among the people," she replied. "But before that," he pressed, "you weren't born here." Ayita met his gaze directly. "I was born to Martha and Thomas Holloway at Eagle's Crossing," she stated flatly. "They named me Maria. Then they left me to die at Shadow's End Canyon because of this." She touched her split lip. "Because they believed I was cursed." Samuel's face drained of color. "How could you possibly know that?" Without explanation, Ayita rose and retrieved the journal from her wiki-up, placing it in his hands. He opened it, recognizing the handwriting immediately. "Martha's journal," he whispered. "We found their cabin abandoned years ago. No trace of them or their child." He looked up, his eyes haunted. "I never believed they would." Thomas was stern, God-fearing, but the truth is written there, Ayita said, her voice tight with emotion she refused to show. "As it is written on my face." Samuel closed the journal, his hands trembling slightly. "You're my niece," he said, the words seeming to surprise even him. "Your family." "I have family," Ayita replied, glancing toward Nietzsche, who stood watching them, his expression unreadable. "But your true blood." "Blood?" Ayita interrupted, a rare flame of anger rising in her chest. "Was it blood that found me starving and exposed? Was it blood that nursed me, taught me to hunt, to heal, to stand proud despite this mark?" She touched her lip again. "My birth parents saw this, and saw a curse. The people saw a child." Samuel was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving between Ayita and the Apache tribe, going about their daily tasks around them. "What happened to Thomas and Martha?" he finally asked. "I don't know," Ayita admitted. "The journal ends the night before I was abandoned." "I came seeking closure," Samuel said, almost to himself. "Perhaps this is it, in a way I never expected." He hesitated, then added, "I have a home in St. Louis. Land means you would want for nothing there." The invitation hung in the air between them, an offer of entry into the white world, of comfort, of acceptance among her own kind. For the briefest moment, Ayita allowed herself to imagine it. Fine dresses instead of buckskin, solid walls instead of wiki-ups, the company of people whose skin and hair matched her own. But in that imagining, there was no Nietzsche with his quiet wisdom, no Elan with his steady heart, no Kiona's laughter or Ahote's teachings, no tribe gathering around the fire to share stories that stretched back through generations. "My place is here," she said finally, the words coming from a place of certainty deep within her chest. "The people are my people." Samuel studied her face, the split lip, the proud set of her jaw, the unwavering dark eyes that seemed at odds with her pale skin and golden hair. "You're sure?" he asked quietly. "You could have a different life." Ayita looked across the settlement to where Nietzsche stood watching, to Elan, who had paused in his work, concern etched on his features, to the tribe that had claimed her when others had discarded her. "I already have a different life," she replied, "one chosen for me by spirits wiser than any of us." Samuel Holloway remained in the settlement for 3 days, his initial shock gradually giving way to a reluctant understanding. He watched Ayita move among the people, gathering herbs with practiced hands, teaching younger children to weave baskets, speaking the Apache language with the fluency of one born to it. He saw how Nietzsche's stern face softened when his daughter approached, how the tribe's children ran to her without hesitation or judgment of her marked appearance. "They truly are your family," he acknowledged on the evening before his departure, as they sat beside the communal fire. "I can see that now." Ayita nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders, permission from her bloodkin to remain where her heart belonged. "Will you search for Thomas and Martha?" she asked. Samuel stared into the flames. "I've been searching for years. I think perhaps they wished not to be found." He glanced at her lip. What they did to you, I cannot reconcile it with the brother I knew." "Fear changes people," Aita said softly. "This is something the people understand well." Later that night, as Samuel slept in the wickiup provided for visitors, Ahote summoned Aita to his dwelling. The medicine man, now bent with age but still sharp of mind and spirit, gestured for her to sit across from him on a woven mat. "The white man leaves tomorrow," he stated, his ancient fingers sorting through a collection of small items spread before him, feathers, stones, bits of bone, and shell. "Yes," Aita confirmed, "he returns to his home in the east." "And you have chosen to remain with the people." It wasn't a question, but Aita answered anyway. "I have." Ahote nodded, as if her response merely confirmed what he had always known. "Then it is time. Tomorrow, with the rising sun, we will hold the ceremony of belonging." Aita's breath caught in her throat. The ceremony of belonging was rarely performed, a sacred ritual reserved for those who had proven themselves worthy of full acceptance into the tribe despite not being born to it. Usually, it was conducted for captives from other tribes who had integrated fully over many years, or occasionally for the rare white trader who had married into the tribe and embraced their ways completely. "Ahote, The council has already agreed," the old man interrupted, his weathered face creasing in a rare smile. "Makia, Naiche, and even Tokala. It is time, Aita, first to dance. Time for the people to claim you as fully as you have claimed them." Dawn broke in ribbons of gold and crimson over the eastern mountains. The entire tribe had risen before first light, gathering in a wide circle at the center of the settlement. Samuel Holloway stood somewhat apart, a respectful observer to a ceremony he could not fully comprehend, but whose significance was unmistakable. Aita knelt at the circle's center, wearing a dress of white buckskin that Kiona and the other women had prepared in secret. Her golden hair hung loose down her back, adorned with eagle feathers and turquoise beads. The split in her lip had been accentuated with red ochre, no longer a mark of shame, but a symbol of the unique path the spirits had chosen for her. Ahote moved slowly around her, chanting in the ancient language used only for the most sacred ceremonies. He carried a smoking bundle of sage and cedar, using an eagle feather to direct the purifying smoke over Aita's head, heart, and hands. Naiche stepped forward next, presenting her with a knife he had crafted specially, its handle carved from the antler of the first deer she had brought down alone, its blade forged by trading with the Navajo to the west. The gift symbolized her ability to provide not just for herself, but for the tribe. One by one, members of the tribe approached, each bringing a small token of acceptance. Kiona with a necklace of polished stones, Makia with an ancient arrowhead passed down through generations, Ilan with a flute he had carved from river reed, the holes placed to match the span of Aita's fingers. Even Tokala, who had doubted her longest, presented a hawk feather, symbol of vision and perception, acknowledgement of her skill as a tracker. Last came the blood ceremony. Ahote used a bone needle to prick Naiche's palm, then Aita's, pressing their wounds together as he spoke the words that would bind them as family in the eyes of both the tribe and the spirits. "Not of the same blood," he intoned, "but of the same heart. Not of the same birth, but of the same spirit. The people claim Aita. Aita claims the people. Let no divide remain." As the sun cleared the mountain peaks, casting its full light over the gathered tribe, Aita raised her face to its warmth. For the first time in her 16 years, she felt complete, no longer caught between worlds, but firmly rooted in the one she had chosen. 5 summers passed since the ceremony of belonging. The valley of whispering pines changed as the world around it changed. White settlements pushing ever closer, cavalry outposts established along the borders of what the government now called Apache territory. The time of free roaming was drawing to a close, a fact that weighed heavily on the tribal council. Ayita, now 21, had grown into a woman whose unique position bridged the increasingly narrow gap between two colliding worlds. When traders came, she translated not just language but intention, helping the tribe navigate the complexities of agreements and borders. When sickness swept through neighboring settlements, she carried Ahote's healing knowledge beyond tribal boundaries, treating white children with the same care she showed her own people. Her wedding to Elan, 3 summers prior, had been celebrated with both Apache tradition and elements Samuel had sent from the east. A white veil that Ayita wore over her ceremonial dress, silver bands they exchanged alongside the traditional binding of hands with sacred cord. Samuel had not returned in person, but his letters arrived with surprising regularity, carried by traders willing to deliver them for the silver coins he enclosed. Through these exchanges, Ayita learned of her birth parents' fate. Thomas and Martha Holloway had been found 2 years earlier, living under different names in a mining settlement near Denver. Thomas had drunk himself to death shortly after their discovery, while Martha, consumed by guilt after learning her abandoned daughter had survived, had returned east with Samuel to live out her days in penitent seclusion. Ayita had written back once, a single message: "I forgive you." Whether it brought Martha peace, she would never know. On this particular morning, Ayita stood with Naiche at the high point overlooking the valley, watching as a column of cavalry soldiers made their way along the river below. The tribe had been warned weeks ago by friendly traders. Government officials were coming to discuss resettlement. "They will offer us land elsewhere," Naiche said, his voice betraying no emotion, though the lines around his eyes had deepened with worry. "Land with boundaries we cannot cross." Ayita nodded. At 53, Naiche remained strong and proud, though silver now streaked his dark hair. "The world narrows for everyone," she replied, "even them." They watched in silence as the dust cloud accompanying the soldiers grew closer. Naiche had been named chief upon Makya's passing 2 winters ago, the old man's final act being to place his ceremonial headdress on the younger warrior's head. Now the burden of guiding the tribe through this transition fell to him. "I am glad you are here," Naiche said suddenly, his hand finding hers in a rare gesture of open affection. "The spirits guided me well when they led me to that canyon ledge." Ayita's throat tightened with emotion. "And me to you, Father." They descended together to where the tribe had gathered, faces solemn but dignified as they prepared to receive the government delegation. Elan stood at the center of the settlement, their 2-year-old daughter Nara balanced on his hip. The child had her father's dark coloring, but her mother's golden hair, a living embodiment of the union between worlds. "Remember who we are," Naiche told his people as the soldiers approached. "Whatever words are spoken today, whatever papers are signed, we remain the people." The delegation was larger than expected. 2 cavalry officers, a government official in a dusty black suit, and surprisingly, a woman. As they dismounted, Ayita stepped forward alongside Naiche, prepared to translate. The woman looked up, and Ayita felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Though lined with age and hardship, the face was unmistakably familiar from the faded daguerreotype Samuel had sent. Martha Holloway, her birth mother. Their eyes met across the distance, Ayita's dark and steady, Martha's blue and filled with tears. The older woman's gaze fixed on the split lip that had once been reason enough to abandon her child to death. "You need no introduction," the government official began awkwardly, gesturing toward Martha. "Mrs. Holloway insisted on accompanying us when she learned which tribe we were visiting." Naiche glanced at Ayita, silently offering support should she need it, but Ayita stood firm, her expression neither hostile nor welcoming as Martha approached with halting steps. "Maria," the older woman whispered. Ayita, she corrected gently but firmly. My name is Ayita. Martha nodded, accepting the correction as deserved. Samuel told me you were well, that you had found family. Her eyes darted to Nietzsche, then to Elan and Nara. I did not believe happiness could grow from such a terrible sin as mine. Not everything that is broken is worthless, Ayita replied, unconsciously echoing words Ahote had spoken to her long ago. Sometimes the breaking is what allows the light to enter. She gestured toward her tribe, the proud, resilient people who had seen value where others saw only difference, who had claimed her when others had discarded her. You came seeking forgiveness, Ayita continued. I gave it to you in my letter, but now I ask something in return. Martha straightened, wiping tears from her lined face. Anything. Help us, Ayita said simply, indicating the government officials who waited impatiently nearby. You abandoned one child to the canyon. Help us ensure these children are not abandoned to wherever these men would send us. Understanding dawned in Martha's eyes. She was the widow of a prominent Boston merchant now, Samuel had written, a woman with connections, with influence that could be wielded. I will, she promised. The negotiations that followed stretched over days, with Ayita translating between languages and worldviews. Martha Holloway proved an unexpected ally, her guilt-driven determination to make amends, giving her a boldness that surprised even the cavalry officers. In the end, the agreement reached was far from perfect. The tribe would relocate, but to a reservation encompassing much of their traditional hunting grounds, including Shadow's End Canyon. They would be subject to government oversight, but retain the right to practice their traditions and ceremonies. On the final evening, as the delegation prepared to depart the next morning, Martha approached Ayita one last time. They stood at the edge of the settlement, the setting sun painting the valley in hues of amber and gold. I have no right to ask, Martha said hesitantly, but may I hold her? She glanced toward little Nara, who was playing nearby under Elan's watchful eye. Ayita considered the request. This woman had once deemed her unworthy of life because of a divided lip. Now she sought connection to a granddaughter she had no claim to. Yet wasn't this the bridge Ayita herself had become? The one who stood between rejection and acceptance, between past wounds and future healing. She nodded once, then called to her daughter in Apache. Nara came running, her small legs carrying her with the boundless energy of childhood. Ayita lifted her, then carefully transferred her into Martha's trembling arms. Her name is Nara, Ayita said. It means heart in our language. Martha gazed down at the child, who reached up with curious fingers to touch the old woman's tear-streaked face. Perfect, Martha whispered, not referring to the absence of any physical mark, but to the simple, complete acceptance in the child's eyes. Later that night, as the tribe gathered around the council fire to discuss the changes coming to their way of life, Nietzsche rose to speak. Though his words were for everyone, his gaze rested on Ayita. Many winters ago, I found a child discarded at Shadow's End, left there because others saw only what was divided, not what was whole, he began, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the settlement. Today, that child stands among us as proof that worth is not determined by appearance or birth, but by the strength of one's spirit. He gestured toward Ayita, who sat with Elan and Nara, her golden hair gleaming in the firelight, the mark on her lip visible to all yet no longer defining her. We face a divided future, Nietzsche continued, but we will face it as Ayita has faced her life, with dignity, with courage, and with the knowledge that what others see as broken, the spirits see as blessed. As the fire crackled and sparks spiraled upward to join the stars, Ayita felt the circle of her life complete itself. From a discarded infant on a canyon ledge to a woman embraced by two worlds, her journey had been one of transformation. Not despite the mark she carried, but because of it. The division in her lip had once made her unwanted. Now it made her invaluable, a living bridge between peoples who desperately needed to understand one another. Not everything that is broken is worthless. Sometimes the breaking is what allows the light to enter.